Hello and good morning, everyone, and welcome to your morning briefing for Wednesday, the 2nd of July, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. Good morning to you. Let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway for our roll-up items. Just as a reminder for everyone, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching this on the Early Warning Network YouTube. Starting on Monday, next Monday, we will be broadcasting on the Forward Observer channel, not the Early Warning channel. We're moving everything we're doing back over to Forward Observer. I will send out an email explaining everything that's going on. Major improvements on the horizon. Rob and I have one last feature to fix on the website, and then we're moving everyone over. And we're going to have this custom Intel platform, the one that we need, not the one that we have right now. With that, let's go ahead and jump inside the Beltway. Starting with the Senate, they passed the one big, beautiful bill. Vice President J.D. Vance was the cast a tie-breaking vote. It was 51-50. The bill has moved on to the House Rules Committee, and House Speaker Mike Johnson says the bill is going to be voted on by the House, the final bill, by Wednesday or Thursday, right in time for this 4th of July Independence Day bill signing for President Trump. By the way, President Trump's schedule is clear today, and it looks like he could be personally involved in ensuring that this bill hurdles the remaining House Republican opposition. There is some talk about Republican holdouts. Republicans, as a reminder, have a fairly slim majority in the House. They cannot lose a lot of votes, but I still think this thing's going to get passed. Also, Speaker Johnson said that Congress will be able to work on another reconciliation bill this fall for fiscal year 2026, and then another one next year before the midterms for fiscal year 2027. With that, Jared, let's go ahead and talk about this F-47. What's the latest?
Okay, so the F-47, when it was announced, it was actually competing with a similar Navy project called the FA-XX Futuristic Fighter. They are shelving the Navy project to focus entirely on the F-47. And when I say they, sorry, I should clarify, the Trump administration is shelving the Navy's project. That way, because it looks like Boeing is going to end up taking both. Boeing, I believe, already won the F-47, and they're in the running for the Navies. So they're saying, yep, look, we don't want to put too much industry, or we don't want to put too much strain on the industry. We need this rapidly. You need to focus entirely on the F-47, get this thing fielded. And if I'm being very frank, I think the F-47, if it doesn't end up like the F-22, will probably be a multi-role fighter with different variants, similar to like the F-35. That's which would allow it to fill the FA-XX futuristic fighter role as well.
Okay, and just for context, the F-47, that's like the 5th gen or 6th gen. What exactly is that?
It's supposed to be a 6th generation fighter. They haven't even released like concept art for it yet, so it's in development with the idea that it will be rapidly deployed here soon. We will see as more information comes out. I will update it just because we need to keep track of where the actual military technology is and how quickly it's fielded.
Okay, and then last question here. This focus on accelerating production of the F-47 and canceling this futuristic fighter, or at least delaying it, do you think that's indicative of anticipated Chinese action on Taiwan?
I think so. And actually, we've discussed here where I think the Chinese are actually going to go in 27. I don't think it's going to happen. But nevertheless, my main concern is that view would actually be taken up inside of the Department of Defense, and they just kind of sit back and go, okay, yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. If you are rapidly deploying a next generation fighter because your main adversary has caught up to you, cool. They're not sitting on their laurels. They are still looking at 27 going, we have to be prepared for this no matter what. Mm-hmm. So I do take that as, yes, they are preparing for it, and that is probably a good sign that they're not going to squander the momentum they've gained.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Also, Jared, while we have you on, let's go ahead and talk about these 2 Chinese MSS agents who were officers arrested by the FBI. So 2 of these knuckleheads were arrested for attempting to recruit Navy personnel. Apparently, they did have some success, but what do we know?
Yes. So they were arrested on Friday. The arrest was announced yesterday, and they appeared in court earlier this week. They successfully recruited at least one U.S. Navy member, um, probably more, and the FBI managed to get the details of that Navy member out of these two. So that person will probably be arrested. I expect we'll find out who it is very soon. One thing of note is that they were also targeting recruiting stations in Central California. So guys that weren't even in the Navy yet, just prospects. They were trying to recruit them to be at intelligence assets. And now we don't have the FBI did not publish who they were targeting. Here you can see actually a picture provided by the FBI that they toured the USS Abraham Lincoln down in Southern California. Notably, they were also up in Washington, but we don't have pictures of that, and that's another base that carries aircraft carriers. But you don't need somebody super high tech in order to make a big difference for information. You don't. You just need to know. You need to find out what people are. I think you called it tech hint yesterday. If you know what equipment they are buying for, you know what equipment is down. So somebody like getting an in on the supply department would be great, because every casualty that requires a part has to go through supply. On my ship, I had somebody that if I was going to figure out to be a Chinese spy, would have been this guy. He was born in Beijing, was not allowed to have a clearance, was stationed in supply, and repeatedly asked for a clearance, and our SSO told him no, never going to happen. But every single time that we would have to order a part, it would have to go through his department. Technically, he wasn't allowed to look at those reports, but we have no guarantee. I know. But we have no guarantee that he didn't. That same guy, when the PLA Navy came to visit San Diego, one of the commanders of that ship asked for him by name, which, again, why are we allowing this man on the ship? Why is he in the Navy at all? And I was told not to ask any further questions about it. So fine. Mm-hmm. We had other ones. This one really just very slight Chinese woman claimed she was 19. Didn't look like she could handle much. Was stationed in deck department. The guys that actually haul the ropes, not somebody you would expect for that. And on her first gun shoot, she bullseyed absolutely everything, which was very suspect, because she didn't have any record of like previous gun qualifications at all. Looked very odd. And she kept trying to get into our top secret space, our skiff, saying, "Hey, I want to be a linguist. I speak Chinese. Like, we know you speak Chinese." Eventually, when she did strike a rate, she ended up with the navigation department, which, again, not like, the big sexy cloak and dagger kind of stuff. It's, where the ship is going. You have access to what our next ports are, what route we're going to take to it. So if you're born in Beijing and, have to be the Chinese translator for the ship, guess what? You are a security liability there.
Sure.
One thing I did note is that one of the QMs, the quartermasters that was up there, I was friends with, she said she got fairly drunk with that girl at one point, and her accent disappeared, suggesting that she had a much firmer grasp of English than what she let on. And again, we were not allowed to question these things. We were not allowed to say, "Hey, sure, maybe we should not have them on our ship," or maybe process them out of the Navy. But that was a different time period. It was the mid 2010s. So there was a lot of, basically we were told, "Hey, if we do this, we get accused of racism."
Well, I was thinking best case scenario, that's there's some ongoing counterintelligence investigation. We'll see. But this is all, we've known this has happened for many decades now. And, the funny thing is, someone asked President Trump the other day, they're like, "Oh, China's hacking into all these U.S. systems." And Trump was like, "Guess what? You don't think we do it to them back?" And so there's definitely some back and forth here. However, there's a decent book called Chinese Intelligence Operations by Nicholas F. Demades that came out, I think, even back in like the late 90s or maybe early 2000s. And he talked about, and other people have talked about some of the approaches that these Chinese Ministry for State Security or Ministry of State Security agents run. And Jared, when you say that MSS is targeting a recruiting station, my first thought was they're trying to find Chinese nationals, or they're trying to find those of Chinese ancestry or descent before they go in the Navy, maybe to start that recruiting cycle much earlier, at least identify what's called the spot and assess phase of recruitment. And one of the approaches that they run, or they have run previously, is they've found these Americans of Chinese descent, and they say, China is such a poor country, and we're a land of peasants, and we're trying to get back to the global average, and we need technology to do that. We need agricultural technology, we need computer technology, computer science, this stuff, and really play on their emotion, play on their loyalty to China, or play on their loyalty to the Chinese people as a means of gaining leverage to get that information, the technology, hard drives, thumb drives, printed off sheets, whatever classification they can get. And so I would not be surprised to see this as something similar is happening here. Jared, I'll give you the last word and we'll move on.
Yeah. You mentioned, targeting people with Chinese ancestry, people who are ethnically Chinese. And that's a fantastic point that I think is overlooked all the time. When I read China's Silent Army, that was something that those journalists were consistently finding, is there was a guy down in Ecuador who was 5 generations removed from China. His family had fled prior to the Republic of China coming up, and he didn't care, that this was a regime that had destroyed his family legacy. He was Chinese, so he was pro-China, so he was using, I think he was a mayor, either a mayor or governor down in Ecuador, using that leverage to benefit China because he was Chinese. They target these people all the time because it's an easy target.
Oh, sure. I think it's something like 90% has been estimated. 90% of MSS targets for recruitment in the United States are Chinese Americans or people who have Chinese ancestry. So with that, Jared, just briefly, there's a big thing about the United States no longer providing weapons to Ukraine. What's the latest there?
Yep. So this is coming from Elbridge Colby, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. He's saying, yes, we are cutting off munitions, but we're also providing other means that we could potentially provide support to them, just not munitions. It's all pending President Trump's approval.
Mm-hmm. All right. And then wrapping up here on the domestic let's go over in New York has seen New York State has reported only a pretty modest increase in deportations since President Trump has taken office. Deportations in New York are up about 11%. Meanwhile, other places like Los Angeles seen a 69% jump, Chicago 57%, Miami 161%. And you look at that and you say, wow, 161%, like that's a big number. But considering the extremely low numbers that we were seeing during Biden, those are, again, pretty modest jumps. By the way, with this big, beautiful bill, the ICE budget gets ramped up. I think up to like $45 billion or something like that. I think I saw. So get ready. And I believe they're getting ready to make ICE the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. So I expect that to ramp up here presently. All right, with that, Jared, welcome back. Let's go ahead and run us through the global sit rep, please.
Yep. We're going to start off in the State Department. This is coming from Marco Rubio. There's a State Department run Substack where he published this. And basically they are refocusing all the stuff that was coming from USAID into a proper foreign aid that does come with strings, but it's blatant that it does, saying, look, if you're going to favor yourself, we will help you, but you need to actually help us. This is not charity. This is, we are actually trying to move the needle here.
So foreign aid helps those who help themselves, in other words. Okay.
Now, Moving over to Mexico. Mexico reported a 4.6% drop in remittance value and a 5.7% drop in total number of remittances in May 2025. And these are compared to May 2024.
Mhm. Jared, this is interesting because previously we did the math. I don't recall the specific percentage drop, but Mexico has for some time, several months now, been complaining about declining remittance payments. And again, I think 4% of the Mexican economy is remittance payments, but there are other countries in Central America where it's up to like 19 or 20%. 20% of their entire economy is U.S. remittances. At any rate, I did the math back then, and Mexico's GDP has dropped about 0.5% due to these falling remittance payments, which is very important because the latest numbers that we've seen out of the Mexican economy is we see that it is growing at about a 0.1% annualized rate of growth, which means they are teetering on recession. As a matter of fact, I think they just narrowly avoided a technical recession in Q1 of this year. That being said, if Mexico does slip into recession, it is almost certainly going to be due to this decline in remittance payments. So very important. Thanks for the update there. And move on to North Korea or to the Israel ceasefire.
Okay. So President Trump announced that Israel agreed to a 60-day ceasefire with Hamas, during which he would hope to achieve a lasting peace. He also called on Hamas to take the deal now because, quote, it will only get worse, all caps. Proper Trump. Hamas reportedly denied the ceasefire this morning. And now the main reason I'm mentioning this is that the it will only get worse, take it now, sounds really similar to what Trump was saying leading up to Operation Midnight Hammer, the strike on Iran's nuclear infrastructure. There were several times where it's like, this is the best you're going to get. You need to take it. And then a few weeks down the line, we flew a bunch of bombers from Missouri into Iran. Mm-hmm. So I am concerned that that is a possibility. I don't think it's likely, but
that we may see a little more stick before we see any more carrot.
Yeah. Now moving on to North Korea. North Korea sent the president of Kim Il-sung Military University to meet his counterpart in Russia as of yesterday morning. Now, North Korea did not disclose the purpose of the meeting, but the two nations have had cultural exchanges, what they're calling cultural exchanges, between cabinet level officials all week. The Russian foreign minister was just over in, one of their foreign minister officials was over in Pyongyang, actually meeting with Kim Jong-un. I do think that this is potentially a step toward rectifying the procedural issues that General Clark highlighted yesterday. We'll have to continue to monitor and update on it, but I think they are potentially getting a lot more cozy on how they actually operate together. Moving over to Taiwan. Taiwan's preparing for its annual Hankwang exercises and will run a civilian mobilization and evacuation drills alongside the military drills. This is similar to last year. But this year publicly includes a 3-stage military drill, and that's going to shift from a joint blockade to strike operations to what they're calling full-scale combat in a real-world settings. Now, I think they probably ran something similar last year, just not publicly. Here you can see they are in a downtown area as of last year, actually operating, in the cities. I think that's what they're preparing for. Basically, you start off trying to prevent it, losing, and then win on the ground.
Conducting that way, like stay behind / insurgency type operations.
They didn't get into insurgency, but basically you have to prepare for each stage, and if you have to assume that you lose in each one, even if you don't. So, like, if you fail to protect against the blockade, then you conduct strike operations against the people coming in, potentially against China itself. If that fails, then you prepare to fight them inside of, like, Kaohsiung or Taipei, which I think is what we're seeing here. They didn't disclose which city this is. This is really how you run a drill, especially when you include the civilian side of it, because the civilian, it's not just evacuation, it's getting into bomb shelters, it's mobilization, it's preparing for air raids and actually running that through the local law enforcement, all of their emergency responses. It is a full nationwide drill. That's how you run a drill. You run it in a realistic scenario in the places you're going to do it. And the reason you do that is that you develop nationwide readiness so that you don't have nationwide panic in the event that this happens. Because if you have a nationwide effort, that makes your resistance against any kind of invasion far more effective.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about people, panicking and making mistakes, making your situation worse for you.
Mm-hmm. And just a quick note, a parallel here is for probably close to 10, maybe longer than 10 years. I've only been aware of it for about 10 years. U.S. Special Operations has been running similar stay behind type exercises in the Baltics and other places in Europe, kind of on the assumption that no one is going to stop. If this were to happen, no one is going to stop a conventional invasion by Russia into the Baltics. The best you can hope for is to fight your way back and then conduct stay behind operations or an insurgency against the Russian occupation. And it kind of sounds like maybe this is similar. Something similar is happening in Taiwan. So thanks for that.
Yeah. All right. And then moving to the other side of the strait, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed this morning that Xi Jinping will not attend the BRICS summit from the 5th of July to the 8th, which is over this weekend. Instead, they're going to send the premier, Li Qiang. Now, this was leaked ahead of Russian President Putin's announcement, so I don't think it's necessarily in solidarity, but it is certainly suspect that neither one of them will be attending the summit that requires the heads of state.
The BRICS summit is going to be missing 2/5 of its BRICS presidents. Okay.
And arguably the two most important members.
Sure. Yeah. The two for military, certainly the two largest. All right. Thanks for that, Jared. And let's go ahead and jump into some of our deep dive items. Starting up we're tracking about 61 protests today. It's pretty average baseline. You can see the map. Most of these continue to happen definitely in the eastern half of the United States, but definitely on the East Coast as well. With that, let's go ahead and jump into this latest FBI and DHS warning about possible lone wolf attacks. Let me just stay from the get-go. FBI says they have no specific intelligence about any specific threats for this coming weekend. But 4th of July is on Friday, Independence Day, the whole holiday weekend. They say they are concerned about the possibility for terror attacks. One of the bulletins reads, quote, "We are concerned about the potential threat of copycat attacks inspired by the 2025 New Year's Day vehicle ramming attack in New Orleans." And it continues, and continued messaging from foreign terrorist organizations calling for attacks against Western targets. So if you're going to be out in a crowd, I've seen a bunch of people say, don't alter your schedules, like don't not attend 4th of July parades or fireworks displays due to this, which I think is probably about right. Just maintain some increased situational awareness. It's kind of becoming the norm here. FBI also warns about possible attacks from lone wolf U.S.-based violent extremists, also in this bulletin. They write, quote, "Lone offenders in particular remain a concern due to their ability to often avoid detection until operational and to inflict significant casualties," end quote. Lone wolf attackers, they say, could use, quote, "weapons, chemical irritants, bodily fluids, or other hazardous materials in their attacks." Again, just to reiterate, the bulletin expresses concern about drone attacks or possible drone attacks or other attacks against soft targets like the New York or San Francisco ferry systems. But again, they say they have no intelligence about any specific threat over the holiday weekend. On that topic, it's not unusual for us to see these reports being published by FBI bulletins. Typically, they're kind of law enforcement sensitive. They go out to all law enforcement agencies and some other people around the country. But again, just to reiterate, demonstrate some increased situational awareness, keep your head on a swivel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. With that, let's go ahead and move on to this note from Charter here. Charter Communications, the CEO, Chris Winfrey, called for cable cutting to be, and that they're talking about taking pair of shears in physical or a shovel or whatever and physically cutting these cable lines. He said he wants them to be, quote, declared acts of terrorism and prosecuted accordingly. Now, Charter is the parent company of Spectrum, and they did suffer a mass cable theft in Los Angeles on the 15th of June, causing 50,000 residents and businesses to go without service for about 30 hours. And this also apparently impacted a U.S. military base and some emergency services in the area. The LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, currently has a $25,000 bounty for information that leads to the arrest of these thieves. Now, I can tell you this is not unrealistic. I think it is at least possible that we do see some of these cable clipping and cable theft and similar types of sabotage or vandalism actually prosecuted as domestic terror. And I say that because far left groups like Antifa continue to claim credit for sabotage and other attacks against critical infrastructure. I see this at least 1 or 2 cases a week. In one recent case, there's a post on an Antifa blog, and they implied credit for stealing fiber optic cable in Kansas City. You can see that. I just clipped the headline there on the slide. More fiber optic vandalism, Kansas City, Missouri. And this is classified under ALF, which is the Animal Liberation Front, ELF, which is the Earth Liberation Front, ETC, I'm not sure what it is, but sabotage and arson attacks. That's what this post from June 30th is categorized as. And so we do continue to see this from far left groups. It is quite possible that certain acts, including the theft of cables or the cutting of these infrastructure cables, could eventually be classified or charged as an act of terrorism if done by these self-described leftist revolutionaries. And frankly, that may not be a bad idea. One of the points that I've just continually made is RICO works. There are undoubtedly criminal conspiracies to go out and commit these types of crimes. And the only way, I would say in every city, there's probably like 20 to 50 maybe hardcore Antifa types. And, you know, we talk about center of gravity, and there's maybe multiple types of center of gravity here. But one of those is you remove the key facilitators. You remove the people who are experienced. Actually, there was this one article, is a report back, I think from Los Angeles or New York, Philadelphia. I forget which group this was. But some of the core Antifa kind of organizers there talked about how fresh some of these rioters are. They're coming. This is like the first riot they've been to. They came and they weren't even wearing the proper black bloc clothing. They didn't have the right gear, like the right gas masks, or the right goggles, the right respirators. And he was talking about kind of what a gaggle that this group of people was. These green rioters, like the people who are fresh, have never engaged in any kind of Antifa black bloc activity or any kind of real direct action. They rely on the experience of this core cadre of experienced Antifa militants. And if you target those experienced Antifa militants and you arrest them and charge them for their crimes, whatever they have, you know, you got to get them on crimes, obviously. But you remove a massive facilitation of riots. And this is something that DHS and FBI and DOJ should really be focusing on, identifying and scooping these people up for criminal conspiracy charges that stick. And it's got to be at the federal level, because we know it's not going to be at the local or state level if you're in California or New York, wherever. All right, with that, let's go ahead and move on. Jared, this is also interesting. The Quad, United States, India, China, and Japan, say they're moving.
Not China. Australia.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I got China on the brain. Yeah. United States, Australia, Japan, and India, the Quad, say they're moving their supply out of China, which is pretty important if you're going to go fight a war over there. What's going on?
Yep. So they announced a slew of new initiatives and updates to existing ones. Right at the top, the Quad Critical Minerals Initiative, brand new. This is intended to address global vulnerability to what they called abrupt constriction in future reliability, which comes down to China shuts off critical minerals because they process everything. And this is mainly targeted at moving mining and processing out of China and into Quad countries. The Quad's also going to begin its Coast Guard cooperation. Anybody who was over on the watch floor got to see one of those, that update. We are just now starting it. It's with cross-stacking officers, but all the Quad members did start that earlier this week. It's just very small note there. They announced the latest iteration of the Quad Indo-Pacific Logistics Network field training exercise, and this is going to test airlift capacities specifically for supplies around natural disasters. But natural disasters are a great way to practice responding to, effectively rebuilding a newly peaceful country, because you practice getting supplies in there into a difficult to land environment. The ministers also teased an initiative. This is going to be called the Quad Ports of the Future Partnership, and this should be fully announced later this year at the Leadership Summit. So it'll probably be a joint announcement with Prime Minister Ishiba, President Trump, Prime Minister Modi, and I think Anthony Albanese is still going to be Prime Minister at that point. Now, why does this matter? All these initiatives are building maritime supply routes outside of China. These are for minerals, disaster relief, which can easily be transitioned over to a wartime airlift, and protection for sea lines of communication, because that's really what the Coast Guard cooperation is there, is they are trying to actually have law enforcement around all of their supply chains. Now, these routes can be used if China cuts off its exports to much of the world, as we saw with like germanium and gallium, or in the event that China's adversaries, these four, have to enforce sanctions on China. You can move all of these out, say, hey, we have supply routes. We don't need to depend on China. Everybody else, you can stop buying from China now. Mm-hmm. So you just have to passively enforce it, and we'll worry about actively enforcing it.
I think that's a fantastic point, because we will likely see a sanctions regime against China when they do move on Taiwan. This is one reason why China has been paring down their treasuries. There's several reasons, but I think the big overarching reason is because they need to insulate themselves against the effects of Western sanctions. And it's one reason why China has been on this 18-month gold buying spree as well. Buying gold. Why are so many central banks around the world buying gold? Yeah, sure, it's partly a flight to safety, but at this level, these countries keep buying gold. You really have to wonder if we're not going to see a massive, obviously we are going to see a massive monetary shift over the next 10 to 20 years. And so I think buying gold on the front end is in preparation for whatever happens on the back. All right, thanks for that, Jared. And with that, let's go ahead and get into some questions. I do want to cover this comment briefly from Frozen Nomad. He says, I get domestic terrorism might apply in some cases, but I take it more seriously if the statement wasn't coming from the CEO of a company that has large financial incentives to make this happen. Well, I think there's two big considerations. Number one, a CEO of a large company like this is far more likely to get an ear at the White House or at the DOJ to change that policy. Also, you look at President Trump's economic policy, and they have said, going back to the first Trump administration, you got to grow your way out of this debt problem. And it's kind of hard to grow your way out of the debt problem when your big cities are having constant internet and other service outages because Antifa is going and cutting the cables or stealing the cables for, I don't know if they're selling the copper or what, but they stole some fiber optic cable. I don't even know if there's like a secondary market and other people can sell that, or they just do it for S's and G's or because they have revolutionary fervor. But it's kind of hard to run the economies of big cities when you keep having these sorts of disruptions. So for those two reasons, I would say I think this is far more likely. And also, if you're that CEO, you are, we're talking about tens of thousands of customers being disrupted here. That's a lot of anger and customer service emails that might mean at some point lost customers. So I think this is a far greater deal. I would not be surprised to actually see some of these people charged under domestic terrorism. Because if you run a blog or a social media account, or you've got revolutionary literature and you are a self-admitted revolutionary, which these people are, and you are trying to disrupt critical infrastructure as a form of direct action, because remember, a lot of these people also talk about accelerationism, about attacking critical infrastructure to accelerate the collapse of our capitalist society, to accelerate the demise of quote unquote late stage capitalism and usher in this revolutionary socialist revolution to give us this socialist utopia. This is the kind of stuff that these people are talking about also. So I would not be at all surprised to see some form of domestic terrorism statutes apply in some of these cases if they can be arrested. All right, Jared, do you have the number? Thanks for the questions, by the way. Do you have the numbers of the Latin American countries and their remittances? Yes, somewhere. We put that in a report some time ago. I'll try to track that down. I know we published a map. I think, was it the State Department or maybe Treasury published a map that showed all those countries. And I want to say it was like Guatemala or Honduras or something like that had the largest. Their economy was like 19% U.S. remittances, or 19% of their economy was based on U.S. remittances. Yeah, we can track those numbers down for you for sure. With deteriorating global order and increasing probability of being drawn into military conflict, how realistic is it to keep the USS Nimitz in service for another 5 to 10 years? That's definitely a Jared question.
That, given I'm not a nuke, that primarily I think would rely on the quality of the reactor at this point. The Nimitz is scheduled to decom next year, I believe.
Decommission.
Decommission. Thank you. That said, I believe it's the USS John F. Kennedy is replacing it. I am pretty certain they've already got that one in the water. That's the latest Gerald R. Ford class carrier. So we should maintain 11. And there is one more Gerald Ford class that's not named yet. I don't think it's named yet. And that should be on here soon. So 5 years, maybe, if we just really want to keep a little bit extra force around. 10 years, I don't think there's even a point to it. Just like we've got the replacement already. We've got at least one replacement.
Mm. All right.
I wanted to address this comment. Can't imagine doing it, and it would end up without the population unable to function. Yeah, in the event of an emergency, yes, you have an enormous amount of people unable to function. That's why you run these drills. The best example I can think of is general quarters in the Navy. Is you end up with you have all these guys that are, a lot of them are brand new. They're 8, some of them as young as 17. Never having really done it in their life. You run these drills specifically so you have people that know how to function. Like that's why you practice everything, because if you don't, you're just going to shut down.
I was thinking of this the other day, just how insulated Americans are from kind of the real world, from the global mean or the global average of domestic disruption and violence. And I see a lot of, and listen, I'm not saying this is likely, but I see a lot of people with a lot of normalcy bias saying stuff like, "Oh, that could never happen here in the United States." And one of the big things when we talk about low intensity conflict or civil war, people say, "Oh, it'll never happen because how are you going to target people?" And again, we're getting a little bit dark here, but I just want to point out, during the collapse of Yugoslavia in the civil wars there, it's like, how can you tell a Serbian from a Bosniak versus a whoever? They would just ask you, like these death squads would literally just go around and say, "Are you Bosnian? Are you Christian or Muslim? Are you Bosnian? Are you Serbian? Or are you whatever, XYZ, whatever you are, Croat, whatever?" And then if you gave them the answer they didn't like that was it. And I'm not saying that is obviously going to happen in the United States, but under certain conditions it could. And it's like, how do you tell a Democrat from a Republican? And people say, "Oh, a civil war can never happen because you can't tell anyone apart." You literally just ask them. So not real complex here.
Yeah. The idea of it can never happen, I think, is silly because, I'm 32. 10 years ago in my early 20s, I was, what had never happened? In my lifetime, there had never not really been mass riots. There were not, maybe one political assassination. There was, how many attempts have we seen in the last year? Yes, things change, and you have to keep your frame of reference, remembering, oh wait, yeah, it was not long ago. None of this stuff was on the "it could happen here" list.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Well, I think a lot of things have not happened here. Like everyone alive today is alive during a point in time, or almost everyone alive today has never known the dollar to not be the world reserve currency. Will not always be that way, and soon it will not be that way. No one alive today has ever lived during a period where U.S. Treasuries have not been a safe haven asset, and there's not been massive global demand for U.S. Treasuries. What's that? I've never even seen these movies, but Pirates of the Caribbean. I've only seen the meme. Yeah, he's like, "Oh, you best start believing in nightmares because you're living in one." Whatever the meme is.
Yeah.
But yeah, potentially. Yeah, potentially. All right, let's tee up some other questions here. Is the cable cutting being discussed aimed at disruption or just stealing the copper? Well, I'm sure there's some level of criminality, like copper thieves, for instance. But on these Antifa blogs and these far left groups doing this stuff, like ELF or whoever's doing it, Earth Liberation Front, they're doing it for effect. I mean, this is not necessarily effects-based targeting, but they're doing it to damage capitalist society because they are leftist revolutionaries. So I don't think this is for stealing. Maybe as a side effect, they can sell the copper, maybe, but their primary intent is to damage capitalist society. Just found your channel and subscribed. Well, Kim, first of all, thank you. Second of all, I've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news, you're going to have to go over to Ford Observer because starting on Monday, we're going to move this show over to the main Ford Observer channel. If you're watching this via YouTube, which I believe you are, the good news is once you follow that channel, you'll be able to continue to watch the show every day. So we appreciate it. Thanks for being along for the ride, Kim. Any other questions, Jared?
Just one quick comment I saw that I'm going to address. Frozen Nomad mentioned maybe we could sell the Nimitz to an ally. Absolutely not. You're not selling a nuclear carrier to any ally. The only one I can think of that we would maybe sell it to is Japan, but that is probably a red line for China to really kick things off because Japan's not supposed to have a military.
Well, I mean, they've been changing their constitution, so I think maybe they are supposed to have a military now.
Well, no, they still use that for diplomacy where, oh yeah, technically we're unarmed. They have the second largest or the second most effective navy in the entire Pacific, but it's a defense force, so it's not really a navy. They play word games. That said, I do think that that's actually a diplomatic strength for Japan because they've made a ton of inroads to build this anti-China coalition on the back of that, saying, hey, yeah, we're sorry for the imperialism a few years ago. We're sorry for everything we did to you. Come on over to our side so that they don't do that to you too. Mm-hmm. It's worked. Plain and simple. The Japanese are about to be stationed in the Philippines. If you said that in the 50s, everybody would have thought you were crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of things that could never happen.
Wild. Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, we're going to be seeing a lot of that. Things that can never happen. All right, Jared, thanks so much. Thanks for that. And everyone, thank you for watching. We appreciate your support. By the way, we've got a lot of emails to send out to subscribers. Here's the problem is we're still trying to figure out, ensure, be 100% that we can move people over. We don't have to do it manually. We can do it automatically. And no one drops and there's, the bottom doesn't fall out and nothing bad happens. So as soon as we're 100% certain that we can do that, we'll start making moves. And so we will start sending emails out with what you can expect. This is not going to be like an overnight thing. This is probably going to be roughly a 2-week process to get everyone moved over and get the new intelligence platform accessible for everyone and up and running at initial operating capacity. Rob and I, we are working on this last watch floor feature so that we can have real-time updates throughout the day. We spend so much money on these big data sources. I mean, we got all sorts of information, access to information, and it's just a process of finding that information and using AI to push it to the watch floor so that you have a real-time feed. It blows Twitter out of the water. Plus, you get our analyst comments. We can break in on a live video if something pops off. There's so many cool things that we're going to be able to do on this new watch floor platform we've built out. We got to just finish tying the bow on top, and then we'll get it moving. So everyone, thanks so much for your support. And that's going to do it for today's briefing. We will be back in your inbox tomorrow morning, back on the show starting at 08 Central Time. Until then, be well and stay out front.